Welcome to the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and I've got Joe Trujillo in the house this week. He is an athletic trainer with the Oakland A's organization, but down in the Dominican Republic. So baseball's been going on for a long time, and a lot of Dominicans have been coming up in the ranks, and we're going to find out a little bit more about the community in the DR, all about baseball and what Joe's doing with his team to keep them healthy and getting into the majors. Hope you enjoy.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on. And you know, we talk Major League Baseball all the time with folks behind the scenes. However, when we're talking Major League Baseball and the minors, the farm teams, and so on, often's brought up the DR, the Dominican Republic. And you were kind enough to reach out to me and said, hey, let's do something about all the staff that are down in the DR. So you're the man to go to. Joe Trujillo, welcome to Zelos.
Hey, Rocky, thanks for having me. As I was telling you kind of earlier, congrats on your 2023 NSCA Personal Trainer of the Year Award. That's a big accomplishment. I'm just happy to be able to connect with you and to provide some insight on how Major League Baseball is influencing the culture down here in the Dominican Republic and how the Latin American players are influencing the Major League clubs and all the way through the minor league system.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, let's dive in because you're with the Oakland Athletics organization. And just before we started to hit that record button, we talked a little bit about the history of the A's. And you told me the Dodgers and the A's are the first two teams to come down to the DR and really set up a complete training facility there. I mean, how long has that been going on for you and the A's?
Yeah. So as far as I know, my history on the baseball down here in Major League Baseball in the Dominican Republic is limited to my 73-year-old assistant that I have down here, Mario Clime. He's worked with our organization for 45 years. So knowing that the A's were the second team to kind of start a spring training facility down here in the Dominican Republic, we can go back about 45 years to it. And Mario's a great guy. Because he, is full of life and he doesn't speak a lick of English, but all the players that have gone up through the system and one of our current players on the Major League side, Ramon Laureano, who's from the Dominican Republic, just always is so thrilled to see Clime when he goes up to spring training. And, being in the complex that I'm at now, it's a huge building. We house all of our players that are on the roster, our coaching staff. We have a great kitchen, a great facility. We have two full fields, we have a half field, and we have a 4-lane covered batting cage because it rains a lot down here. That's just been built recently. And Mario has all these stories about when he first got here, how it was just, a bit of dirt, and he's planted the trees that now provide a shade, and he takes real pride in that. And you can kind of embrace and see that Dominican pride and culture and the growth of baseball out here. And this is a country that's ran, by baseball, and most Latin American countries here in the islands are going to be that same way. So it's been great to have Mario kind of teach me along the way the history of this complex and kind of have the guy that build it from the ground up, so to speak.
That's got to be fantastic. So tell me about your background first. Like, how did you come up in the ranks of the Oakland A's organization? Did you play baseball? Is that what you've been living for yourself? And then you went in and became an athletic trainer. Like, what was your road to success so far?
Yeah. Some days it doesn't feel too much like a great story, but similar to most other athletic trainers, I was talking to Sam Radbill on the PBATS podcast, and most ATs that I know and that we see in the major leagues in the game at some point were an athlete and they got hurt and they realized, oh, my high school has this person who can kind of take the reins on my rehab assignment instead of having to go into a physical therapy clinic or not knowing what to do out of school. So similar to that, I broke my ankle my first play my senior year of football at Thornton High School. Shout out to my Thornton peeps there. And I was like, okay, what's the next step here? As I, was left-handed, played quarterback, probably the worst one in school history, which is fine. And then I, was a pitcher for the team as well. So I was like, okay, my upper body's still fine, but we've got to fix the lower body. And Dave, our athletic trainer, I think he works with University of Texas at the moment. He, kind of introduced me to the role that athletic trainers play, especially for somebody like me who grew up in a single parent household with a mother that didn't work, so I grew up in Section 8 housing. We didn't have any extra funds to go and seek physical therapy or co-pays or anything like that. So having an athletic trainer at a school like that was huge in my development to become an athletic trainer and to continue my passion for baseball and for sports into college. So truly my starting point was when I thought everything had ended with a fracture in my left ankle. Kind of grew me into the passion for what I do today.
Wow. And it sounds like you put yourself through school. Where did you go to school?
So I'm an alumni of Grand Canyon University. I graduated in 2015. Lopes up to all of my GCU alums out there. So I set sail. My mom passed away 2 weeks after I graduated high school. So that summer leading into my freshman year, I was kind of couch surfing and living in the basement at my auntie and uncle's house. I didn't really have a plan on what I was going to do except go to college, try and get my education, and then probably come back to Colorado. So I, packed my bags. I left to Phoenix, Arizona, and I met, I went through the whole curriculum there for 4 years. I graduated cum laude, and, I was able to start my own sports medicine business in Arizona. Or I guess it wasn't my plan at the time. I did not plan on meeting a girl that would become my wife all these years later. So in my freshman year, I met my wife, Carla, and she kind of influenced me, her and her family, to kind of start my life in Arizona. So after a couple of off seasons, going back to visit my family in Colorado, I said, I think I'm going to hang back this summer and live on campus and work a IT support job or something. And then that became me buying an apartment and then housing out here. So with me wanting baseball and still being in the sports medicine realm for baseball, I owe a lot to my wife and her family, because not only did I, find my wife in college and I got my degree in what I wanted to do, but I already owned property in Arizona, which is where half of the Major League Baseball spring training facilities are, and the networking possibilities are huge. And I don't have to work the next 45 years of my life to then retire and go to Arizona to play golf like the rest of the people I play golf with.
That's great. What a great strategy you have there, even for all the way to retirement. Oh my gosh. So you get out of school, you start your own sports med kind of thing, but what got you into, obviously you're surrounded, like you say, by spring training and everything else. It's either baseball or golf down in Arizona, as far as I know. So how was it that you got yourself into the A's organization?
So like I tell any young and up and coming athletic trainer or student, even, create a LinkedIn account and just send network connections all day long. And don't be afraid if people, don't respond to you. And don't be afraid if you don't hear back from somebody. Just like how I connected with you. You think we've been connected on LinkedIn for a couple of years, and I saw what you were doing on this podcast, which led us to where we're at now. Anybody that had any sort of role in Major League or minor league baseball, I was shooting connections out 30, 40, 50 a day. I forget what LinkedIn lets you do for free each day, but I would just max it out. And I got hit with a lot of no's or whatever, and I got hit with a lot of responses on that. And I applied, year after year to different positions that opened up and on the PBATS website. And, it just never really worked out. I wasn't a good candidate. I would ask, how can I make my resume better? And for whatever reason, I wasn't selected for it. And finally, 2 years ago, I was working at a local high school of mine. And, I talked to my wife and I said, I feel like I need to go check that PBATS website. I just feel like, this might be the last opportunity I really get to apply before we kind of start having kids and all that. And she said, yeah, whatever we can do, just make sure that your first job's in Arizona. So I said, okay, fair enough. So I went on PBATS and I saw there was a seasonal hire position for the Oakland A's in the Arizona Complex League. And I currently live in Apache Junction, Arizona, and that's probably, the furthest east of where all the complexes are. And the A's just happened to be the closest drive to where I live. So I applied. And then I text one of my friends, acquaintances inside of another organization, and I had asked them, like, I'm putting out some fillers. What do you guys got opening up here? What do you project, starting spring training? And he responded back to me and said, yeah, we're going to have something here in Arizona. Why don't you send your resume and CV and all that to this person? Okay. So the day that I was scheduled to interview with the Oakland A's, I received a call from my friend in that organization saying, hey, we know that you're interviewing with Oakland. Is there any way that we can interview you first? So I said, of course. Do I need to go to the complex? Can we do it through Zoom? How do you want to do it? So we did it through Zoom, and I felt really good about it, which is always a good feeling. And when I went through the Oakland A's interview, I felt really, really good about it. And I was trying to run back to the school I worked at in the afternoon to get to a baseball game I had to cover. And I got a call from one of the minor league medical coordinators with Oakland. And they had said that, we'd like to offer you the job. We're going to sit on it for a day or two. And the next day I ended up getting a job offer from Nate Brooks in the Oakland A's. And, I responded to the other organization and asked them kind of where they were in their timeline. And they said that they were still pretty early. They just wanted to make sure that they interviewed me. So I thanked them for their time. I accepted the job that day with Oakland. If long story short, just keep trying. The persistence is huge and it's very competitive. And I'm 30 years old now, and it took me until I was 29 to finally crack through the door of minor league baseball or professional baseball. So don't be discouraged, anybody that's watching this, because it's tough, and just always ask for feedback on how you can be a better candidate for that specific organization.
That's great advice, Joe. I mean, I'll echo that too. Like, you bring up LinkedIn, and a few years ago when this podcast was just beginning, I had a couple of nice names that came on. I was fortunate enough to have some colleagues that are notable in the industry, and then I did the same thing as you did. I just went on to LinkedIn and connected with some people, and then asked who those connections were, what other connections they had. And you'd look on LinkedIn, and it was almost like going fishing. It's kind of like, I'm going to cast it out there and see who connects with me. And well, over the course of this time, we have 130 episodes later, we've gotten some amazing guests like yourself and others that are in the world of sports. And a lot of times they'll say, I've been listening. I can't believe you want me on. I'm like, of course I want you on. This is all about how I'm going to learn from you. So please. So, I would say that is exactly right. So tell me though, you're in the DR. You're not in Arizona. I missed that point. I don't know where that story went to, but somehow first of all, is your wife with you? Are you still happily married? Or did you say, honey, I've got to go. You have the dog. I'm going to the DR. What's that?
Yeah. So the conversations actually started pretty around this time last year in the dog days of rookie ball. I kind of had gotten a feeling that there's a chance I could be asked back. There was a decent chance that it would probably be down in the DR. So on our long dog walks in the morning and in the night, because you could never walk a dog in the summer in Arizona during the day, I just kind of started laying a couple of hints here and there. And, my wife said she can give me a year. So she's still in Arizona with my dog. The distance is tough, but she's fortunate enough to work a job now where she's able to come out here about once a month. She was just out here last weekend, and she'll be down here for the All-Star break at the end of this month. It's bite-sized, but we're on the downslope of the season here, so I only got about 4 more months. It's not always easy to find that balance of your love life or your family and professional baseball. But I've been lucky to again find a woman who understands kind of what my career goals are. And we're lucky that she has the job that can allow her to work from an international island and still not have to take time off of work for it technically. So still happily married. We have 5 years married. I've been with her for 12 years since my freshman year of college. And yeah, so the times from time to time are tough, but she understands, and we're hoping that we go back to the United States next year and we're in Arizona again, or one of our affiliates.
Oh, fabulous. That really is great. Does your dog speak Spanish?
No, my dog doesn't do anything but lay around all day. A huge Great Dane chocolate lab, so he just enjoys being in the air conditioning.
Oh man, watch your back when you're picking up after him. So, with your support staff, you're part of a big kind of crew down there in the DR. What's that made up of?
Yeah, so we've kind of tried to change our player development program this last year by bringing in a new director of player development, Veronica Alvarez, who, if you don't know who she is, a great follow on Instagram and a great leader. She's just awesome to have as a boss, and somebody that's Latin herself and is just able to fully embrace what we're doing down here. We also brought in Cooper Goldby, who was a former player of ours, as a manager, and his old college teammate, Gunnar Buhner, who has been our infield and our hitting instructor, along with local coaching staff out here, Carlos Casamero, Jose Vicente, and Santa Maria Brito, who is our pitching coordinator. And then I don't know how the Oakland A's convinced Jim Gott to come down here with his wife and with his son Danny to be our bat boy, but we love all of them, and the Latin coaches have just taken us in. We have our video guy, Henry Henkel, who's from New York. Our head strength and conditioning coach is Kevin Tito Hernandez, who was formerly with the Baltimore Orioles down here in the DR. It's from New York as well, and his family's from the Dominican Republic. And then I just got my coworker, my assistant, another athletic trainer to help with the workload here, Daniel Hernandez, who's also coincidentally from New York. He's just fresh out of school in Delaware. So he's 24 years old, and he's learning how to pull 13 and 14-hour days already.
That's a long day, man. So that's something we don't really discuss all that much, is the grunt work, the amount of time and how much elbow grease you really have to devote to your craft. And you just got to put in the hours, and with a smile on your face, with passion in your heart. But I mean, 12, 13-hour, 14-hour days or whatever. I mean, how long is the time that you spend down there? Like, is this a year-round occupation down in the DR, or is it seasonal?
It's yes and no. So I knew that I was going to be coming down to the DR at the end of October last year. And since I'm local to Arizona, I would help out with our off-season rehab assignments. Just because a guy, it's October and everybody's, done with Major League Baseball season, doesn't mean that the guy that just got Tommy John surgery in October, we don't get to see him for the rest of the year. So they'll come to our complex and they'll rehab with us. So I go down to like 2 or 3 days a week worth of working time. It's not long days at all. There's no on-field stuff really. So I knew I was coming down here. My report time was going to be late January, early February. I spent 2.5 weeks in Japan right before I came down to the Dominican Republic. So my body was all types of messed up and trying to figure out which way was up and what was nighttime and what was daytime. Yeah, so I'm down here from early February until instructional league ends, which will be 3rd week of October. There was a week period there where I went back up to the United States for spring training, and our players did, so they can experience kind of the United States spring training, where they'll be hopefully in the years to come as they develop. So yeah, it's kind of, a longer time, 10 months or so out here in the Dominican Republic.
And how many players are you overseeing? Like, how many are in the dorms there that have come down for training?
So our roster size is limited to 35 players. Now, before the start of the Dominican Summer League, we can have any number of players that are, obviously we'll have to release down to that certain number, or they'll have to be promoted to the United States. And then with the new collective bargaining agreement, if a Latin American player, in a simple way that I understand it, if a Latin American player is hurt, they can go up to the United States to rehab for X amount of days before they're required to come back down to the Dominican Republic. So it's kind of a little bit more challenging for us if we have a guy that we would normally send to rehab all season. Now we're down here where there's not the same resources per se, not worse resources, but I don't have a HydroWorks, underwater treadmill down here in the Dominican complex, and we do in the spring training facility. So when you have a guy, let's say, on a running progression, and he could benefit from, taking a little bit of the weight off of his feet while doing running progression. Unfortunately, we don't have that out here. So it forces you to think outside of the box as an athletic trainer to find new ways that we can kind of mimic what they're going to get when they go to the United States, because we want to have the players have a familiar language day one when they go to the United States. We don't want, it's already going to be intimidating enough. They don't speak the language, and it's, they're in camp with a whole bunch of other players that are also American and a mix of Latin players and new players. So if there's one language that we can teach them before they go there, how the athletic training room works, where can you go find help? Who do you need to talk to there? The words that are on the treatment board are the same down here as you're getting up there for your arm care. That way there's a comfortability and a trust built in. As soon as they get there, they're like, okay, all the other stuff aside, I know I'm comfortable in this area.
Wow, that's great. Sounds like quite the system. Where do you fit into the system? What's your role and responsibility? Where are the parameters, and what do you focus on?
So I basically oversee the day-to-day treatment of our players that are currently injured, the maintenance on players that aren't injured yet, and the arm care system that we have for our players down here. Other than that, I tell my family all the time, I get paid money to watch professional baseball from like the best seat in the house, in the dugout. So yeah, even though our days are long, I wake up at 4 a.m. down here. I get my own exercise in because it's super important to keep yourself healthy during the duration of the season. And then I start my morning treatments around 5:50, 6 a.m. And then the players will come in for pregame or pre-practice treatment. They go off and do their meetings, their English class. I have a staff meeting, and then it's right into pregame practice stuff. Who needs to throw bullpens? And we're out there monitoring all of it. If a kid's on a running progression, a throwing program, ATs are right there just in case a guy gets hit in the head while playing catch, just in case a foul ball catches somebody, watching batting practice. Weird things happen. And any ATs that are watching this will tell you just the craziest stuff will happen when you least expect it. So it's real important for athletic trainers to be, kind of navigating around the practice fields, just in case a guy pulls up weird and has a little pain in his hamstring. We can try to, get treatments on him right away. And then other than that,
you were just saying, sorry to interrupt, but you got my interest peaked here. Without naming names, give me an example of one of those weird things that just popped up that you're like, I never saw that coming.
Yeah, so I had a pitcher who had some posterior shoulder pain, and we were on throwing program. We're progressing great, and he is like the day before he's supposed to get back on the mound in the game. He's doing catch play with one of our other pitchers, and he just misreads a cutter movement just a little bit. It catches the glove, and then it cracks him in the eye, so the eye swells up, and and that's irritated. So we have to, kind of push back his return into the game. So he's been dealing with that. And it's just, how do you plan for situations like that? It's big emergency preparedness with our profession in case life-threatening injury happens on the field. But, something simple like that where, you may not be paying attention right away, and you turn around and, oh man, there's player X, on the ground, writhing in pain or not in a lot of pain, but his eye is closed now because of swelling. And that's just, one example of things that kind of come up out of the blue with how things are down here.
And so in your scope of practice, what are your go-to tools? Obviously your eyes, your mouth, and your hands, those kind of go without saying as an athletic trainer, but like what are the most common injuries that you're dealing with on a regular basis, and how do you typically address them? What's your screening assessment process?
Yeah. So when you work in professional baseball, you're going to have a lot of shoulder pathologies, elbow pathologies, and hip pathologies, just kind of the nature of these younger kids. I have players that are 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds that are in their first, second, or third year of professional baseball, and they're still growing and developing. So a lot of what I get is, fatigue in the shoulder. Guys will come in and say, I feel kind of heavy in my shoulder, or my velocity is dropping down just a little bit, and something just doesn't feel right. And they're still learning their body as well. So, I get a lot of, impingement syndromes and, some inflammatory processes that go on in the shoulder as the year gets longer, because, we're throwing a higher volume than these bodies are used to. And, a lot of them early in the season, because they feel good after an off season, ramp it up a little bit too quickly. And so a secondary part of our job is to kind of re-educate them and remind, like, it's good that you're feeling good here in February, but the wins and losses don't count until, June, July, and August. So, if we got to go at like 75% for catch play, we're good. But in any process of athletic training or evaluating a injury, if you have a systemic way to do so, through your experience in your clinical rotations or through your experience in your practice, I kind of run through the same basic tests with a shoulder as I do with any sort of shoulder. And sometimes, friends of mine will ask, if it's not X, why do you still do tests for X? And I tell them simply, you don't know until you can rule out. And he may have problems, and you think for sure it's got to be a slap tear, for sure it's got to be a slap tear. And then you go and you do a test for impingement, and then it's for sure it's impingement now. And now you're left wondering. So not having a bias just because you saw the mechanism of the injury, and having a systemic, here's what I do, A, B, C, and D, and your special tests and your assessment will help eliminate a lot of your second guessing as a clinician. And everybody's a little bit different with that. My shoulder evaluations, I would say, are probably on the shorter side than some of the other ATs that I've worked with, even with in the A's organization. I got to sit in last year with Nate Brooks, our minor league medical coordinator, on one of his shoulder evals. And I was trying to frantically take photos in my brain of what he was doing without looking like the newest guy there, trying to write down notes and stuff. And it's just great to watch him work, because he is like robotic with the way that he does it. And he could tell that he's been doing it for a long time. And so whatever you feel comfortable with, and that's getting you good results on your guys, stick to it.
Right on. And you mentioned earlier Tommy John surgeries. What's the incident rate on that? Do you see that coming down the pipe a lot? And if so, is there a certain profile characteristic with that athlete that matches others that have come before?
So I don't see much of that down here, fortunately. We do get, me working in the Arizona Complex League last year, we get the guys on rehab assignment that have had Tommy John surgery. And from my point of view, not looking at much of the research that is produced every year, there doesn't seem to be a profile of a guy. We have heavier set pitchers that have more valgus extension overload, and we have skinnier pitchers that are taller that have less valgus extension overload in their elbow, would theoretically have less stress on the UCL bands during the late cocking phase of the throwing steps. But when a guy decides to pop, it just kind of seems like random in nature. I know that the biomechanists and the exercise physiologists and other ATs have dedicated so much of their time to kind of look, frame by frame at like how much torque we're putting on a guy's shoulder. And there's some correlations between like gird and how much external rotation versus internal rotation that we have with a player. And if there's deficiencies at a certain number, but at the end of the day, when you see it happen, it's just, okay, we're going to go and get some images taken and see how we can best modify this players and save their career.
So do you look at, I I won't say joint by joint, but the kinematic sequencing of an average throw or pitch, are you looking at their ability to extend their spine properly or laterally flex, counter rotation? Are you looking into internal, external rotation of the hip? What's that landing, that stepping leg? What's happening all the way through the chain? Or is that more the biomechanist or others that are looking at that?
Yeah, I think with all of our support staff, there's going to be a little bit of overlap with just about everybody, right? The physical therapist is going to overlap with us a little bit, and we're going to overlap biomechanically with our biomechanist, and our nutritionist is going to overlap a little bit with the strength staff, and our strength staff's going to, so that's why it's a team. There's no clear cut, like everyone, we blend together and we make the wall stronger for our players and that connective stuff so that we can get the whole system of treatment for a player. And I think that if I wanted to spend time going through how much force I forget, the plant foot is putting down as it's going down the slope and how that correlates to exertional external rotation. One, I didn't study a lot of that, and it's not a language that I speak often. Two, I probably won't be able to deliver it in a way that the athlete is going to be able to understand it, which is what a lot of the biomechanists that we have phenomenal ability in doing, simplifying the complicated stuff so that we know how to speak the same language to the player. On the whole, yes, we would love to see what small correlations we're having with is their foot staying pronated for just a little bit too long, causing us to overexert the internal rotators of the hip instead of the external rotators, and that is creating a lag in our pelvic rotation during the throwing motion, which is causing a lordotic spine, which is then causing our arm to trail back and the chest to come forward. But yeah, there's really a lot of ways you can kind of slice that pie down frame by frame.
Sounds like you speak that language quite well. So I would give yourself a little bit more credit on that. That's fantastic. So your assistant that you mentioned, who's been there for like 45 years, and he planted the shade trees now that provide you some solace and relief from the sun. And he wore a tremendous amount of hats, from being a cook to a strength coach to the trainer to a landscaper, heck, a whole bunch of things. How many hats do you wear, or have we gotten to that point in DR baseball development where you're just the exclusive, I'll take the word just, you are the exclusive athletic trainer who oversees that department? You've got a physical therapist, you've got a biomechanist, you've got the strength coach, and this and that, batting coach, and so on. Do you find yourself wearing a lot of hats, or are you focused on one primary theme?
Yeah, from time to time, depending on what's going on, sometimes coaches will have to miss because they have a family member that's sick, or they're feeling sick themselves. So every once in a while, I've had to step in and kind of run a player through his hitting progression for the day. So to be familiar with the baseball terminology, tees and flips, and side tees and side flips like that, front toss is just languages that you'll learn as you're around the game. But I've been fortunate with the staff that we've had. I haven't had to switch the hat too much. Every once in a while, I have to play the role of mom or dad or nurse, where I'm getting knocks on my door here at like 3 a.m. for a stomach ache or for dizziness in their head. And I, for the most part, have gotten our athletes used to knowing where to find medicine for simple ailments like that. And it's a learning process, because when they go to the United States, they're going to be in a hotel in the middle of the night, and there's not going to be an athletic trainer that's just waiting down in the lobby for them when they have a stomach ache. So it's how can I find the solution for myself right now until I get to the complex the next morning, to make sure that I feel better, or who do I need to contact with my symptoms in a message to make sure that they know and they can run it to the proper channel. So for the most part, and I early on, before I had my American assistant down here, I would take players to doctor's appointments as well. And early on in the year, I had like 14 or 15 guys on the injury report, and it was just me kind of working my way through that each day, and then going to doctor's appointments in the afternoon. now that I have, Klime and Daniel, and he wants to learn Daniel, super excited about that. So I send him like, hey, you can go into Boca Chica and go see the doctor with such and such player and just let me know what documentation we have, and let's upload it into the EMR and just make accurate notes about it. So yeah, I've been fortunate that our coaching staff has been really tight and they're able to fit their hats there. And then every once in a while you kind of play chaperone, when we go on like a team building event with the players, and you kind of have to put the dad hat on or the chaperone hat. But yeah, been fortunate to only have to focus on like super sports medicine heavy stuff.
Nice. And so when you focus on that sports med stuff, what's your jazz? What's your jam? What do you love really? Like something comes up and you're like, oh, this is definitely my wheelhouse and I'm up for it. What's your strength?
I think that my biggest strength as a practitioner is going to be the like immediate treatment of an injury that flares up on a player. I'd like to think that I can, kind of start a prehab on a guy that I think is about to break, so to speak. But yeah, my immediate care on a guy, I spent a lot of times, for example, I spent a lot of years working club level soccer in Arizona. And I spent 1 year working in professional soccer. And so inversion ankle injuries is like in my sleep. I have my protocol down and usually can get players back in a extremely fast amount of time. Probably too fast for how some of the higher ups would want. So I have to slow myself down sometimes, even though a player's feeling good. But yeah, that just immediate care. And it's nice too to have assistance, because when a guy goes and he, feels like he pulled a hammy, and he's too apprehensive to let us kind of mess with him, we can just, go and start doing a Hivamat to start some lymphatic system drainage going on to try and mitigate a lot of the swelling that's going to go on. Not all of the swelling. We're not too big on just throwing ice right on an injury. We can have that debate one way or the other.
I don't think we'd be debating that, Joe. I think we'd be on the same side of the line there.
Absolutely. And so I use a lot of, Hivamats and fast bands for ankle injuries and contrast on a lot of my guys. I like the ability to just be able to manipulate our lymphatic and our blood flow restriction. And then our vasoconstriction and dilation is just huge when we want to have, the best sort of day zero for an injury. And I think that the data that we have and the research that has been out for a while kind of supports that. And I've been able to get some pretty good results and send those 8 out of 10 pains down into 1 out of 10 the next day.
Nice. I'm going to do a name drop here, and it's not anything, but I spent the weekend with Sue Falsone, and Sue was the first
I love
female,
Sue. I love
Sue?
it. Yes.
Yeah, so Sue and I were presenting at a conference over the weekend, and she's big into dry needling. And right now she's with the Houston Texans, but she was the first female athletic trainer in Major League Baseball with the Dodgers. Tell me, are you delving into dry needling yourself, or other kind of, I will say, Eastern approaches or anything of that nature, something outside of the conventional Western approach?
Yes, it's so funny that you bring Sue up. So Sue has presented at the Arizona Athletic Trainers Association conferences a lot. And so I've been able to chat with her from time to time. She actually did her structure and function class with the athletic trainers in the Oakland A's organization and other organizations during spring training, which I unfortunately wasn't a part of because I was down here. But the A's do give me money for continuing education. And so I am planning on doing a structure and function dry needling course here in the off season when I have a little bit of free time, as they say. So yeah, that's great. And how small the world is that you brought Sue up?
Yeah. Okay. So for those that are just in the listening audience and not the video watching, Joe just put his fingers up in the quotation when he said free time. Tell me a little bit about your quote unquote free time. What does that look like?
I mean, outside of golfing, just about as much as I can to make up for all the days I don't get to golf during the regular season. It's just kind of nice to be at home with my wife, with my dog. But like I said, I still have responsibilities to monitor my athletes that I have down here. We do a call log every month with our minor league ATs to our players that are currently on the roster in order to make sure that there's not new injuries that are popping up. that they're abiding by our throwing program and our progression as we see fit. So that way they're ready when it comes to reporting for spring training. They're healthy and they're ready to go with the rest of our crew. And there's not somebody that's just been not throwing for 3 months or however long they're down. We also monitor to make sure their workload is being okay, because some of these players, even after going through a 10-month long season, they will go and play in winter ball in Mexico, or they'll be invited up to fall ball in the United States or the Arizona Winter League. And so they're playing baseball year round, and the body takes a toll after a while. So when I'm not texting players during the off season, I'm in the spring training complex helping with off season rehabs, doing continuing education, and fulfilling the other requirements of my licensure, which is 50 continuing education units every 2 years. And this year is a reporting year. So I'm got like 42 down. I got 8 more hours to go.
Wow. All right. Well, you got a few things to accomplish there, but you got plenty of time with that. I'm always curious about the inner workings of organizations, especially when it comes to upward and downward trends or mobility, I guess you'd say. Like your players, they're in the DR, they go up to the States and they get into like AAA, or some jump right up into the majors. But then it's got to work both ways. You've got to get some players that aren't in a hot trend. They're suffering for whatever reason. They're in that slump mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever it is. And is that where they go? They go into the DR for a little R&R and restoration before they're trying to make their way back up. Give me an idea of how that flow is with players within the athletics organization, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. It's real simple down here in the Dominican Republic. As soon as a player is promoted to the United States, they do not come back down here to the Dominican Republic. So when a player is in Arizona in rookie ball, he may get promoted to low A Stockton. And then if he struggles a little bit, or if another player gets their number called ahead of him and a roster move has to be made, they'll typically come back down to Arizona to kind of get their mental right, or get more at bats. Because instead of riding the bench, for a week at a time before they get some playing time, you come down to Arizona, you get used every day, every other day, and kind of find that rhythm again, find the baseball player that we drafted you or acquired you to be. And that happens daily. We get emails about our roster moves every day. And so there's players that come down, and the general public would never know unless you live in a city where our minor league affiliate is, and you're like, hey, what happened to such and such player? Where did they go? And you kind of comb through, the media or the MILB.com transaction list to see what moves were made. So yeah, once it's kind of sad. It's kind of a relief, but kind of sad down here because you live with these players, and I'm out here. Even when I'm done with this podcast, I'm going to go and, be out and probably play video games with the players out at the TV room. And you get to mingle with them a little bit and get to know them just outside of baseball and how their families are doing. Some of these players haven't seen their families in a while. I got 2 Brazilian players down here who haven't seen their family in a while. And if all goes well, they won't see their family for a little bit longer because they'll go to spring training or to instructional league in the United States and, continue their dream as a pro baseball player. But because of that, when I have to send, or when a number gets called to send a guy up, it's always a little bittersweet because you're like, oh, he was a great clubhouse guy, but I'm super excited to see where his career is going to take him. But I know that I'm not going to see him until I'm back in the United States.
Right on. Well, shout out to the Stockton Ports. You mentioned them, and it's always good. They're not too far from myself here, only about an hour away. And of course, we've got San Jose Giants right on the other side of the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I love going to minor league games because it's almost like you're going back in time to the way baseball used to be. In a way, you're down there, you're mingling with the players, you're so close to the field, you can smell the grass clippings and all that. It's just it's almost like being right there on the field. So shout out there. But one last question, I guess, Joe, because we're kind of getting up to the clock time here, is that we were talking about hats. The one hat that I didn't ask you about was sports psychologist. It sounds like you kind of wear a little bit of that, but do you guys have um, a visualization coach, sports psychologist, somebody dealing with the mental aspects of just being young kids trying to make it to the big show?
Yeah, so we do have a whole mental performance team throughout the whole entire organization, and they rove around from level to level. So our players do get time with Rosie, and she's amazing. Just when she comes into town, all the players, their eyes just light up, and they're like, "Okay, I can talk to Rosie about it." And that's not to say that they're uncomfortable talking to any of the coaching staff about a specific topic, but there's some topics that they may not want to talk about. I'm not getting enough playing time. I don't want to go talk to any of the coaches about it because I don't want it to feel like I'm doing something wrong or that I'm mad about it. I just want to know how I can get better, and maybe she can tell me how I can lay it on the coaches a little bit better. But yeah, you do in the athletic training profession, you'll be surprised at how quickly a player or a coach who's laying on that table will start opening up about their life. And I don't want to take too much time over the limit, but one of my athletes this year just really got me into like, wow, what a peculiar position I'm in. He's from Venezuela. He's got a little baby girl at home who's months old, and he is grinding through the Dominican League here, and he finally clears injury treatments, and he's like fully ready to go into games, and we promote him to the United States. He's not coming back down to the DR now, and so there's more distance between him and his little daughter, and he's having all this family trouble going on back at home, things that we as fans of the game, you never realize that most of these players, they have family problems going on back home. Just because they're a professional athlete doesn't mean there's not arguments with the spouse or your kids, doing with or without because, you're not there. And it really just made me realize the less talking that you do and the more listening, the players will find a way to fill that kind of empty airspace when you're in a treatment. And it just kind of makes my heart feel good. I get a little emotional just thinking about it, like how happy he was to get promoted and how well his whole situation got because he's in the United States. So I just wish the best for him. And, outside of having any sort of formal training as a psychologist, which I'm not, and not claiming to be, just letting him kind of open up his heart to me on an hour-long ride to the team doctor for some imaging, being in there with him and listening. It's a crucial point that if I can stress anything for athletic trainers to do that may listen to this, just lend your athlete an ear, and it doesn't always have to be about baseball. And in fact, the last thing that I talk about a player with in the training room is what's going on every day. We live in it. We see it. We all know when you did good. We all know when you did bad. How's mom and dad doing? How are you doing? How much sleep are you getting? Let's talk about that stuff that's going on.
Well, that's obvious that you're one heck of a communicator and developing into an amazing professional. So I can see that it won't be long before there's a new head athletic trainer in Major League Baseball, because you're going somewhere, man. You are.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, my friend. Joe, this has been great. I can't express my thanks enough for you reaching out. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. If listening audience, young, upcoming, growing athletic trainers, or anybody in the field want to follow you and your exploits within the DR and Arizona and beyond, what's the best way they can do that?
Absolutely. Outside of giving my number away, if you just want to throw me a connection request on LinkedIn, Joe Trujillo is my name on that, and I'm more than likely to connect with you back, because it's all just a big network about who you know, and I want to hear more about your story. And I'm really open to messaging back and forth on that, and then maybe it leads us to some more in-depth conversations like it has for Rocky and I. So yeah, get at me on LinkedIn, and then you can also find me on Instagram at Joe the ATC. And then you can kind of see the photos and videos I get to post for my time down here in the Dominican Republic.
Right on, Joe. Okay, I'll make sure those are in the description below the podcast for the listening audience to check out and click on. But I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. This has been really great.
Perfect. I love it, Rocky. Thanks so much for agreeing to have me on. I thank you for your time.
And that brings this episode of the Zelos podcast to a close. I want to thank Joe and the Oakland A's organization for allowing this to happen. And if you want to find out more about the behind the scenes in Major League Baseball, well, all you have to do is go to our archives. We've got plenty of awesome guests in the MLB as well as a whole bunch of other sports. So until next week, go out there and make it a good one.